Hey everyone, welcome back to Rally Caps. It's a podcast for artists, entrepreneurs, and everybody in between. I'm Steven.
I'm Eric.
And today we've got a very fun semi-breaking news episode of Rally Caps. We don't really do like culture pieces or news timely things around like camera releases or anything like that typically, but we're doing that today.
Yeah.
Because something was announced yesterday. We're recording on June 6th, 2024. What was announced on June 5th, Eric?
The Canon C400.
Whoa.
Steven, why do we normally not talk about gear?
Because it doesn't matter. Just kidding. It does a lot. And we've talked about gear quite a bit this year so far.
That's true. But you're also being too nice in that I'm a miserable person to talk to about gear too.
You just don't, you don't care about it.
Correct.
Typically.
I think I might be changing a little bit.
I think maybe it's exposure therapy because we've all been talking about it so much in the studio this year. Because if you've been a listener of episodes of Rally Caps, at least within the past few months, you know that we've all been going through a few different changes with cameras, some
Not me. Tried and true over here.
experimenting with different brands.
More stupidity than anything.
Yeah, exploring different options. And when I say we, I mean primarily Gene and I, and also Braxton and some others in the studio at Creative Club.
So everyone except Eric.
So basically everyone except Eric. So that's where the exposure therapy comes in. We have been talking about it so much that maybe you are interested in it now, or actually maybe because of this announcement, you're not interested in it anymore.
At all.
Yeah. So
this is the one I've been waiting for like 3 years.
You had said out loud within the last few weeks, you're like, I might be switching to Sony now. I don't know. Everybody else, like I can see the benefits of it. And you know, there's still merits to it. But as far as the Cinema EOS system from Canon is concerned, like you just said, this is the camera that I feel like all of us Canon fans have been waiting for. It seems like the unicorn cinema camera from them.
Yeah. I was shocked. I had no idea it was anywhere near release. Mm-hmm. And this camera was what was rumored to be the Canon C200 Mark II like 2 years ago, it seems.
Yeah, there was a lot of rumors about a year ago. There were pretty strong rumors indicating a C200 Mark II and then a C700 Mark III. And both of those were going to be RF. And they each, it's funny because the rumors around those almost split the difference between what the C400 is. Yeah. The C200 Mark II felt a little more in line as like a C70, but a better body style. Yeah. And the C700 Mark III was going to be like a monster of a camera. Yeah. Like what most people would not need, you know, a proper cinema camera.
And if you're unfamiliar with what Steven means by RF, that's just the lens mount. That's the new native mount for virtually all Canon cameras. They moved away from the EF mount, which was what reigned supreme for decades.
Almost 30 years, I think. Yeah. I mean, it was on their film cameras, it was on everything.
So the last camera to do EF was the 1DX Mark III?
Mark III, I believe. And they introduced the EOS R, which was their first mirrorless camera with the RF mount in 2017?
Is it really that recent?
2017, 2018.
That sounds right.
I'm going to fact check that real quick if you want to ramble.
Sounds right. It was like right around when we got Creative Club that people were starting to switch to mirrorless, and then Canon announced mirrorless because Fujifilm was all the rage then with EVF.
Yep.
They were like the first to do it.
October 9th, 2018.
Okay.
So it'll be 6 years old, which doesn't seem like that long. 6 years old in this October. So RF has been around for quite some time within the stills line on Canon's lineup. Yeah. But they only have presently one camera with RF mount in the cinema line, and that's the C70, which we're filming this on right now.
On YouTube.
You have two of those. Yeah. And RF, because it's obviously the future for Canon, and all the lenses are switching, was very appealing for you on a cinema side because easily swappable between your stills cameras and your cinema cameras. And as much as we love the C70s and the image out of them, a lot of complaints about it too, and things that we want to see improved. And I feel like the C400 answers a lot of those problems for you.
Yeah, so I was reminded because I put all the specs on my story. Yeah. I never talk about gear, but that elicited a lot of responses on Instagram. And then I got into a bunch of conversations, which were really interesting. And that made me realize I completely forgot the video I made 2 years ago, which was a review of the Canon C70. And that was right after we filmed the majority of Moving Still, which we shot almost exclusively on the C70 as 8cam.
Yep.
And so I had a really good amount of reps with that camera and knowing how it worked, how it functioned, what the pain points were.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the pain points were ergonomics.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a big chunky 1DX basically with a big fan in the back. The top handle's worthless in box. I'm glad I reviewed this video this morning because I would not have remembered all these things. That top handle also had a terrible placement for the mic. So you have to like completely rig it out with a Condor Blue Cage or Bright Tangerine or whatever. Get a wooden camera top handle is what I essentially did. Jerry rig how to put the shotgun mic on there. But one of the worst complaints of it is the swivel LCD screen. It is just awful.
I feel like they just didn't QC that enough before shipping it because everyone had the exact same problem.
Yeah.
And I think they started repairing it for free also because they knew that they
But it
messed
didn't
up.
matter because it would just get wobbly again.
Yeah,
I got a new one and I thought they had fixed the problem, but that one wobbles now too.
Yep.
And that maybe not as bad as the first one, but also it's true across both. A lot of the plastic covers over ports have just fallen off.
Yeah.
So that sucks, especially with exposure to salt water. So
My biggest complaint is that it's not waterproof. It's crazy.
Yeah, salt waterproof.
Why'd you put fans in a cinema camera? Silly.
So I did that. It was bad. But yeah, I mean, other than that, such a good image out of it. I
Great
guess
image.
the other pain point was mini XLR.
Yep.
Which
helped with the size of the body, which was nice,
Yeah.
but not as robust a connection as full size XLR.
and it's sort of that like B-level cinema camera where you don't necessarily want to rig it out fully all the time. And so that's where it's really annoying to have a mini XLR converter to XLR. Because then, like on mine, I have the Mondo ties kind of looping that cable around, so it's out of the way. So in that regard, if the cable's always there, then I'm kind of like whatever.
Yeah,
I don't really care. But I guess that's a good kind of segue into C400 talk.
Let's talk about all the things that the C400 does offer that feel like an upgrade to the C70.
Everything.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone.
Everything except mini XLR.
Yeah, that is a nice segue. You're right.
Yeah.
The only complaint from us so far with the initial spec sheet out in the wild, pre-orders available and everything, they still kept mini XLR, which I feel like they could have justified putting full-size XLR in, considering that the body size is so small. I did look up the dimensions because I was curious. They have images of it being flown on a gimbal with no side handle, no top handle, no V-mount, just a lens on the front. And it is 5.6 inches in depth and then 5.3 top to side.
That's small.
So it's very small.
So it is smaller than the C200.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy small. It's almost a perfect cube.
It's like
just slightly longer than it is taller and wider.
Maybe a bit longer than a Komodo. Because Komodo's like a square, basically.
Yeah,
like a box.
it probably. What are the Komodo dimensions actually? That would be a good reference point, I think, for people.
I think what's interesting about the layout of it's very different than a lot of the Canon cinema cameras. A lot of the audio interface is on the back of a lot of cameras, and now they put it on the side. Cool light up buttons. That's fun. But then it seems like they have 4/4 20 mounts in the back to then have really easily accessible place to put a V mount or gold mount if you want. But then they still have those chunky batteries that the C70 and C200 and their cinema line all have, except it seems like an upgraded version, which I didn't look deep into it yet, but it seems like they'll probably translate. Like I'll be able to use my old batteries on this camera as well.
Yeah.
And honestly, I look at that and I go, I don't know if I really need to put V mount on this camera if I have the BP A60.
Well, that's the nice thing about it being built out in this way is because it can be, I think, customized to whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
If you want it to have the same kind of run and gun style of a C70, you could just throw a BP60 on the back, get literally 6 hours of battery life, maybe more now that they have the new extended N denoted ones. But just have a lens on the front, have the little airy rosette handle on the side. That's it.
Yeah.
You could if you want, and a screen on top as well, but
And a mic.
and a microphone. Oh,
I love the fact that
rails.
there's the handle.
And a V mount. and probably like a 7-inch monitor on top, follow focus.
Easy rig.
Easy. It's amazing how quickly these things just get built out.
But the side handle's legendary, and that's what's different about C70 because it feels much more like an actual DSLR.
Yes.
With the grip on the right, which is cool in one sense, but
Which is built into the body, just to be clear.
Right,
It
it's
is a
not
DSLR grip
separate.
that is just, it is a 1DX in that sense.
but you could remove that side handle and just have a brick.
Or you can rotate the hand. Oh, they didn't like us talking about this camera. They're coming to get us.
That's a loud one.
It's a pretty loud one.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to Chicago.
But yeah, you're right. It does feel like it's totally versatile because there's all these spec images where I'm looking at one where it's just on a Ronin and it's just the brain and lens.
Yep.
And
Pretty sweet.
It's small, but I've seen other specs where it's like just fully massively rigged out like any cinema camera can be. And
Yep.
this feels like the cripple hammer they didn't want to drop on themselves.
It
That's
feels
the
like
wrong way to phrase
they
it, 'cause
finally
people-
stopped using the cripple hammer.
Yes.
Yes.
It was going to cripple the rest of their line is what I was getting at.
I get you, yeah.
Like, because, okay, we're going too far into that conversation. Let's
Yeah.
back it up.
I'm going to back up 2 paces.
Yeah.
One, the thing I like about the handle so much is that you can also pivot it
Rotate
like
it.
the C200 because
Sick.
that's so clutch, and having that handle stuck at one angle all the time does feel quite limiting ergonomically. And then to follow up on the Komodo talk, the Komodo is a perfect cube 4x4x4 inches. So this is about 1.5 inches roughly on every dimension. So slightly larger in that sense.
Yeah.
Comparable, I would say.
So backing up to my video I made 2 years ago,
Yes.
in that video, I talked about the rumored C200 Mark II and saying that if that camera released, I would almost assuredly buy it as my A cam
Yep.
and use the C70s as a B and a C. Since then, they haven't released anything, and I've been kind of wedged into this place where do I switch to Sony and have like a fully dedicated box style cinema camera because that's ultimately what I want, or do I hold out? And so I held out because again, like
They're really great
Do I
cameras.
really need the C400? I don't. Like that was a conversation I was having with someone in DMs. He was like, you make beautiful work as it is. You make awesome stuff with what you have already. But the fact that we use these cameras so much in this capacity, like we are right now on podcasting, on YouTube videos, they're just such phenomenal studio cameras and will function as incredible BC cams on set for commercial or narrative work because I'm assuming that this sensor is very, very similar to the DGO sensor that's in the C70.
Yeah, we'll see. We don't know about. Yeah, we'll see.
So we'll get into the spec sheet of what some of the skeptical feelings we have because there's reason to be skeptical about Canon. And it's just a whole game of we'll see.
Yeah, like all this sounds. That is a good way to preface before we get even deeper. Is that this all sounds amazing to us? We're very excited to see Canon release a camera like this that does seem to appear, at least, checking off all the boxes and meeting all of the asks that people who have been using Canon for so long have been wanting. Like, feels like this is a really cool step in the right direction.
Yes.
Which I say also knowing that yesterday, kind of sneakily, they also dropped a L35 1.4.
Yeah.
Finally, in the RF mount. That's the first good L35 millimeter that they've released. And so there's something about having those releases on the same day in tandem, 2 things that people have been asking for so long. It's like, okay, cool. This is hopeful. That's very interesting.
They're just always 3 years behind.
Which
it's a bummer.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
But I look at the 35 prime and I don't see it as any kind of filmmaker's lens.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But they're finally meeting like the photographers who've been
Right.
asking for that for literally 6 years.
Yeah.
Because that people were like, why didn't you launch with this? Why didn't you start the
Super
RF mount
weird.
with? Because that is one of the most popular focal lengths for a lot of people. Why didn't you start the RF system with that lens? So I don't know. We are not on the production side of things, but to the person who said you don't need that camera, that's fair. But I think once we go through the specs, there will be a lot of things that we can highlight that actually would be legitimate reasons to upgrade to a camera like this. And also the sheer fact that you can build it out to the degree that you can in combination with some of the things that alleviate pain points is, I think, justifiable to bring on larger sets and use for bigger projects. So let's start rattling off some of those specs for this camera.
6K.
Sick. That's 2 more Ks than the C70.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's cool. Full frame.
Full frame 6K.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
The C70 is a Super 35.
Super 35
4K.
4K.
Yep.
And we've realized recently, I don't know how we went this long and didn't realize that the different lower quality codecs, MP4, XF, AVC, I believe, use the full Super 35 sensor, and then when you switch to RAW, it crops in a little bit.
I'm so confused by that still.
Super weird.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I don't know if a lot of people know that, and it's really frustrating.
The odd thing is that it's the same dimensions in the project.
Yes, so it's just cropping in.
But still has the same dimensions, huh?
17:9.
Yeah, same pixel
They're
count.
saying that.
4096.
But
yeah.
is that really baked into the metadata?
I don't know.
They just say that.
What's the deal, Canon?
Yeah, but
It's for things like that we.
but there's also frustrating things like that is the C-Log2 curve. Very clearly, it has C-Log2 and C-Log3 curve. Very in par with what the C200 was.
Yeah.
But then you switch over to R5 and R5C. The R5 log3 is the same as the log3 in the C70.
Correct.
The log3 in the R5C is log2. It just is.
Was it the log 3 or the internal raw, the raw light?
Yeah, which is
Both.
No, both. Yeah.
Oh.
There's no like true log3 in the R5C. I've tested it.
Dun,
unless
dun, dun.
unless there's other codecs I didn't test.
Okay.
But the 10-bit 422
log3
in the R5C is log2. It's very clearly log2. You put the Rec 709 on it in post and you're like, it's log2.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, I can only get log2 curve if I shoot 8K RAW on this camera.
Yeah.
But the log3 is actually log2.
Interesting.
So I didn't do
Weird.
any kind of dynamic range tests or anything like that.
For sure.
And I haven't done any tests on that camera either as far as native ISO goes, but it's 800, 3200 in that camera.
Yep.
Which leads us to our next point, the C400.
First time ever in a camera.
Triple native ISO.
Triple base ISOs, which is very cool. I think the most popular example of native ISOs is the Sony FX3, which is lauded for, there's the 800 base, and then there's the 12,000 to 800,
Shooting
which
in the
is
dark.
like the low light monster. And it's incredible. It's
in the dark. My FX3.
when we say
Shot a movie on it.
the creator.
Anyway,
When we say base ISOs, native ISOs, these are the ISOs that the camera is really designed to perform best at.
Yeah.
So before dual native base ISOs were a thing, it was just like, here is 640 or 800 or whatever it is, and you always work around that because you're going to get the cleanest image with the most dynamic range that is going to look the best in your edit. And so the nice thing about having a higher native ISO is that you can have your standard one for the majority of your shooting, and then if you have a low light scene, you can kick up on the FX3 to 12,800, and it's not going to be as clean, I believe, as 800, but it's going to be cleaner than the value directly below and directly above it because it is optimized to perform at that one specifically. That is very cool. So the wild thing about the C400 is that it has 3 of those this time at 800, 3200, and now 12,800, which is, I would say, the biggest thing about this camera because Canon historically has been very bad at low light stuff.
Yes.
And so that is the thing that I'm most excited and most curious to see.
Scared about.
If it's actually going to be good at 12,800. I would hope so. That'd be awesome. If it's not, okay, is what it is. But having 800, 3200, great for pretty normal stuff. The 12,800, I think, is just awesome for any low light type of projects that you want to work on. Very curious to see what that looks like and how it grades. And I believe those bases are available in all of the codecs and resolutions available
I believe so.
The C400 as well. Very cool. That's a world first for a cinema camera to have that.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
That they came in swinging like that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I am also really nervous about what that will look like, especially in combination with any of their raw codecs because they have notoriously so much chromatic noise in the shadows.
Yeah.
It's nothing I ever really care about. I've never pixel peeped that hard.
Sure.
Some people care so much about that.
Yeah.
And there's ways you can clean it up in post with removing that chromatic noise. And I think a lot of raw codecs struggle with that from what I've heard. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But so that in combination, like if you're shooting one of the raw codecs and 12,800, I'm like, is that even going to be
Who knows?
good?
Yeah.
Is it going to be anywhere near 16 stops of dynamic range as they say? But I don't know if you're shooting at 12,800, you probably don't have that much of a dynamic scene in the first place if you need to be up that high.
Yeah, that's
so
a good
I'm
point.
kind of like,
Yep.
So, but the versatility of that, this is like, you do not need bells and whistles in regards to ND or more light on paper.
Right.
Because you have 800, 3200, 12,800, and 10 stops of internal ND, which is what we have in the C200, C70, most of their cinema cameras, which is the coolest feature, in my opinion, on the Canon cinema cameras, which is in the FX6.
Yeah, they have an electronic ND in the FX6.
But is probably the biggest pain point for all FX3 users is needing to carry around a variable ND while filming.
Yep, to throw on the front of the lens. Talk about internal NDs, yep.
But a lot of the FX3 shooters will just always leave that thing on because they can jump to 12,800 and still shoot through an ND.
Yep.
And it's fine.
It's funny. It's not like actually that difficult to deal with because they make such high quality VNDs now that you could do a 1 to 5 and have a 5 to 9 ready to go.
Yeah.
Some brands have the magnetic attachments now, so it's even easier to swap on and off. And then, like you said, if you need to shoot through an ND at 12,800 and you want to shoot it shallow, you totally can. I know some people who actually do need to compensate for it because there is no middle ground. That could be considered a drawback almost. It's like if you want to bump your ISO, you might as well go to the next cleanest option because it's going to be cleaner than even, say, like a 4,000 ISO. Just because the value is higher, 4,000 is not a native ISO for that camera. So shooting native is always going to be the best option when you're shooting any camera. And that does vary. That number will change depending on the camera that you're actually using. But it is very cool to see Canon have a base ISO that high now. Curious to see what it looks like. We'll see.
Well, in that regard too, I think because a lot of our audience, a lot of our background is shooting weddings. And so I look at this camera, I'm like, it's not a wedding camera. Unless you want to spend the money on it to invest, would be a phenomenal wedding camera. Honestly, like,
it'd be awesome.
Out of box would be an amazing wedding camera.
Yeah.
Do you need it for weddings? No. That's when I think like it's going to inevitably drop the price of the C70 if you're in the Canon system. Great time to grab a C70, get a good monitor, and that's a great wedding option. I even thought the C70 was phenomenal for a documentary. I think the C400 on paper is like the best documentary camera on paper, maybe out there.
Killer.
With the triple native or base ISO, with all the internal ND, with really reliable autofocus, especially the built-in ND. Having that in a camera for documentary work is a total game changer. To run inside to outside and just boom, boom, and you're not having to unscrew and rescrew a 1 to 5 or a 5 to 9 or whatever the delineations are. And but the reason I would want it so much is like, yes, I would shoot a wedding with that camera if I had it, but I would be doing any kind of documentary style work with it as well as tearing it down and then building it up for a huge project if that's what we were going for.
I mean, I'll say that we were just at a wedding this past weekend. The videographer was using a Komodo. Fully kitted out, going to be a similar price point to the C400. So it's not out of the question. He probably does more than just weddings, but I think you're right. I think if you want to dabble a little bit and just have one rock star workhorse camera that you can bring on a proper set and then also use on the weekends for a couple weddings that you're doing every year, be killer. It's just going to be a beautiful image out of that thing. So usable, so ergonomically so much better in every single way, which is awesome. Continuing on a little bit on the spec sheet, we talked about the fact that it's a 6K full frame sensor. It's backside illuminated, and it's a brand new sensor for Canon. This is a new sensor that they have not put in a camera before. So we'll be interested to see what the image looks like, if it's more dynamic range, if any like little nitpicky type things, even like the chroma noise that you mentioned earlier. It'd be interesting to see what that actually looks like. But new sensors, I think in general, are exciting because means that they're cooking up new stuff in the lab over there. Cinema Raw Lite, HQ-ST-LT, all 12-bit RAW internal, which is awesome. And then if you want to shoot in 4K, you can. It's an oversampled 4K. You can shoot that up to 120, so double the 60 cap on the 6K. And there's no cropping on any of that as well. So it's full frame all the time, unless you want to switch to the Super 35 or Super 16 modes that are included with it as well.
Which I don't ever really get that. Like,
Yeah.
why you want to do that? Just for more reach, but then you're lowering the resolution.
Yeah. I've never really understood it either, to be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe just composition. I don't know. I actually can't
Yeah.
wrap my head around it. Maybe there's just like an old wide lens that you want to use and crop in a little bit.
Yeah.
A fisheye that you want to look like a 200 millimeter.
And in Super 16.
Yeah. I want to take portraits with this fisheye. I'm going to crop into Super 16.
Which I think it does take pictures. I think it does have
Wait, really?
I think it does have a JPEG option. I thought I saw on the spec sheet.
If you get this camera, can we take it to a photo
pictures.
wedding and just shoot photos all day with it?
Fully rigged out with a 7-inch monitor.
That's incredible. We touched on the 10 stops of mechanical ND that are included. We touched on the mini XLR that's in body. There is a separately available PL to RF adapter as well if you want to use.
Expensive.
Yeah, PL. Did they give a price point on that?
It was like $800.
Okay, yeah. And then another, I'd say, huge benefit: connections, ports. You're no longer
USB?
limited to
C? Sorry.
You can use USB-C on this guy.
Sorry, no.
Instead of you being limited to the dumb HDMI port on the
Yes.
C70, SDI, baby.
SDI out.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, HDMI is fine, but
Yeah.
just not. That was another complaint I had in the C70 video. It's just less professional because the connection is just less reliable. And yeah, you're locked in on SDI, and the better monitors have that option as well. So if you're like really wanting to rig it out, having that is like, it's almost kind of unacceptable on a big set to have an HDMI out.
Yeah.
And not have an SDI out.
I can't imagine most like proper film sets use HDMI.
No.
No.
Yeah. So that's amazing.
Yep.
That solves one of the problems.
Yep.
Another one of the problems, again, the only one kind of transferring over is the mini XLR.
Yeah.
What I was saying about USB-C is that the monitor that comes on camera is no longer a proprietary plug. It's now USB-C into camera.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that is cool. Okay.
It feels cleaner. It feels, and there's a new clamp that keeps it in place as well.
Interesting. The touchscreen control monitor, that one. Oh, nice. Okay.
Which I wonder how good that really is. They usually have a terrible screen on those cameras.
Yeah.
But you end up not using it most of the time. What's frustrating is if you want to utilize the autofocus, you need to have that on there.
No.
But there are more button controls
Yeah.
recently, and if you can get used to those, which like they did in firmware updates on the C70 with a lot of the toggle buttons allowing you to like swap to different faces.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
So like if it accidentally goes to the wrong face on
Yeah.
face detection, you can just toggle the button over and switch faces if there's like 5 in the screen.
Right.
So if that's the case and that's your only issue of it not selecting the right thing,
Yeah.
you toggle over. But if you're fully kitted out with a 7-inch monitor and it's not hitting autofocus the way you want, just click to manual real quick, rack your focus, and you're there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't.
That's interesting, actually. That's a good point. Because I forgot that they have the little like nubbin control stick as well.
Yep.
Similar to the R5, R6, all of that.
But based on how you want to rig it, you might not have the side handle either. You might have a top handle.
Depending.
You know? So
I would love a way that you didn't have to use the included monitor. That'd be awesome.
I think there's a really cool scenario where you're not even using the side piece.
Yeah.
You're just doing a top handle and a 7-inch or 5-inch monitor, and you're just most of the time manually focusing.
Yeah.
Unless it's like really obviously autofocus
Totally.
based with like one person in frame.
Totally. And then if you wanted to use that in studio for a talking head setup, which would be hilariously overkill, but in the event that you wanted to, you still have the touchscreen flippy monitor that you can use to monitor yourself.
Totally. Another thing is that it's no longer dual SD.
Yeah.
It's the combo like in the R5, the CF Express SD.
Which is probably because of the 6K bump in
Yes.
full frame.
But you can still record to both in those high codecs as long as you have a strong enough card.
You can record directly to all the frame rate options to SD.
That's what I read.
Okay, sick. That's great.
Yeah, CF and SD cards allow for simultaneous recording even when shooting RAW.
Great.
All recording options are recorded to CF Express with sub-recording and proxy options available for SD. Yep.
That's a pretty cool workflow, honestly, doing proxies to the SD with the full res, like
you can
raw
do-
stuff to the CF Express.
You can do the same on double SD. It's
Yeah.
just, it feels like that lends itself more to doing that process because you're like, I'm going to record on the big
right.
boy.
Like the super fast card.
Yeah.
I mean, CF Express are
Incredible.
5 to 6 times 5 to 6 times faster than SD cards. Like the Extreme Pros from SanDisk are like 1700 read, 1400 write, something like that.
And it's annoying. Like if you have the new MacBook Pros, it's really nice to just have SD to drop footage. But if you have, your YouTube video essentially shared how much faster transferring with the CF Express is.
Almost half the time.
Again, if you're in documentary style work, as long as you have that card reader, you could just be flying through backups.
Oh, well, it's funny. The VTube video I made was actually just comparing two CF Express cards in different readers. The readers do make a big difference as well because they get so hot because of the amount of data. Having one that's a metal chassis, like the SanDisk Pro Reader or something like that, I don't know, that is going to be faster than a plastic one from ProGrade. But I can't even imagine. I'd be curious to do a test between like the SD that goes into a C400 and the CF Express, take both of those out, transfer the same stuff to a computer to see what the difference is there. But yeah.
Options.
Very good options. And I feel like those are all, there's more specs. You can read more about this everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. But those are all the things that I think probably mean the most to us, at least.
Yeah.
Workflow wise.
Yeah, I can't. There is one more that they've improved autofocus closer to the edge of the frame. So, I mean, you're just getting a new rendition of their autofocus, which is already very good.
Yes.
Eye detection's gotten very good with firmware updates as well.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's all really exciting on paper. And yeah, just looking at the back of the camera now too, there's just not that many buttons on the back. You have you have an HDMI out, you have 2 mini XLR, you have SDI out, and monitor.
I'll raise this as well. It technically is a totally different version of autofocus for the C400. So the C70 has their dual pixel AF. This is dual pixel AF2, which is, I believe, I'm going to fact check myself real quick. Dual pixel AF2 is what I've seen on their stills cameras.
R3.
So like the R5, R3.
Yeah. So even better. I'm sure it's better.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it be better?
Yeah, dual pixel AF2 on the R5. So getting closer to R5 levels of autofocus in still mode is very cool. I wonder how that'll translate to video. Also, I had no idea that the R5 was on such super sale right now. That's crazy. I think I need to drop the price of my used one.
Oof.
You can get it brand new from B&H for $2,900 right now.
Wow.
That's crazy. And the C70 has dropped in price too to $5,000 even.
Wow.
Down from $55,000.
Well, got to update my video then. Because I priced it at the old one. Well, I guess they're used. One's saltwater too. I don't know. I need to send.
That's a cool saltwater edition. This is the surfing edition of this camera.
This is the moving still C70.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but a lot of people look at this camera and they're like, I need to offload to buy. But I was saying to someone in DMs that my work is so diversified now that I would actually just benefit from buying this and not getting rid of anything. I could offload old gear. I still have a 1DX Mark II. I still have a C200 that's like very busted.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, there's that whole sentimental part of it that's hard for me to release. And there's still videos I would love to make with these old cameras just to prove a point as well, which is kind of antithetical to the conversation we're having right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, there's a lot of unreasonable reasons I want to keep a lot of gear.
Yeah.
But also it's pretty nice to have a lot of cameras as options if we need them ever. You know, if it's just kind of sitting off to the side and you need a stills camera real quick, or you need something to shoot a video that's, you know, you don't want to run downstairs. Again, not the best reasons. But for me, having a fully dedicated, like true cinema camera, where it's like, that's not a question, that is a cinema camera, is what I've been craving and wanting, because the C200 really was that. And the C70, although was spec-wise so much better of an upgrade, it felt like a step back in the ergonomics and build out, because C200 had XLR. It didn't have mini XLR. You know, it had SDI out. Didn't have SDI out on the C70.
The shape of the body was more conducive for building a rig too.
Right.
Yep.
But the raw codec was 5 times the size of the raw codec in the new cinema cameras. So then, yeah, it was so interesting to see them drop this camera, because it felt like they're now making the move to cannibalize their old EF cinema cameras, EF mount cinema cameras, which surprises me that they didn't do a C400 release and a C600 release at the same time.
Yeah.
We're like two versions of this camera. One's like, maybe this one's 8K and has their cinema raw, not just raw light. Those kinds of high-end features at the more $15,000 price point.
Yeah.
Which is more on par with that line that they already have.
Yep.
It's interesting because they've never really done that. They've always in their cinema line tried to protect the big dogs. And it feels like this one's like, no, I could see this on commercial and movie sets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why not?
Yep.
You know, barring the image is good.
Yeah. No. Yep.
But
it certainly has all of the I/O and features that anyone who would want to take this onto a set would have, and they wouldn't be lacking those things for the most
it'd be
part.
taken seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the majority of places you could bring this. I mean, if you're seeing Komodos and seeing other FX6s and cameras around this price range, which I guess we haven't said the price yet. The C400 will run for $8,000 US. So it's not a cheap camera by any means, but in the world of cinema cameras, it actually, weirdly enough, is I would say a fairly good value for what you're getting out of it. Which again, that's all relative to the price points that it's being stacked up against. But I think the case still stands that it is a really good value of a cinema camera when you look at everything that it's offering for that price point. The interesting thing that I'm very curious to see come September, because this is available for pre-order right now, and it will be shipping in September, I believe 2024.
Yeah, I didn't check, but I assume so, yeah.
I think it's September. I'm very curious to see how Sony responds to this, because there have been rumors for a while that the FX6 Mark II is coming out this year, later this year, probably Q4. And that would be the closest analog, I think, to a C400, just seeing in the sense that like the Komodo is a similar price point, but I think it's intended for a very different audience. C400 feels like that one man running gun if you need it, and then can be built out bigger. FX6 very similarly. Our friend Mark Bone loves that as his kind of like travel dock camera and uses that relentlessly on a lot of trips where size and weight are really crucial, and you need something that can be stripped down or kitted out, and it's great in both cases. I am very just curious to see what the FX6 Mark II looks like if that does indeed come out this year, because I imagine that would cause quite a stir as far as like what's going to be the best value if it comes in at the same spec sheet as the C400 but lower in price, because this kicks up the bar for the cinema line substantially for Canon at least, and previously the FX6 was priced at about like $5,500 or $6,000. So if they try to maintain that while still upgrading a lot of the internals, and you end up getting a camera that's very competitive with the C400 but for $2,000 less, that could be really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious to see. It's cool to see Canon finally doing something that feels like a home run.
It feels like they're finally establishing themselves to get people to stay long term, because if this camera is what I hope it is, I'm good. Yep. I don't feel the need to switch over. I feel like the C70 is nimble enough. I don't, for the reasons that people love an FX3 of just being like a small rig or whatever, I can get that out of the 8K RAW and the R5 if I need to. Yeah. Honestly, it's true. And it's gorgeous. Like the short films we've done in 8K RAW on that camera are insanely beautiful. Do I want to be shooting that all the time? Of course not. It's just for like pickup shots, you know? And that's usually, I think of Danny on Itis, like the garbage can shot they shot with an FX3 versus the Venice because of size. And be like, yeah, that was 1% to 2% of the film. And that would be the case for me as well now that, because I really contemplated going the FX6 route when I was buying the C70. Yeah. I almost jumped ship. Yep. But a lot of me looks back at that and is happy that I didn't have to entirely switch systems, because I kept with Canon stills, and I love the R5 and R5C for stills work. So to then still have all the lenses and not need to sell them and all that stuff, that's how I'm feeling about it now. And just using the same lenses on this camera then, and adapting it when I want to, if I have bigger shoots, if I want to adapt to PL, if we want to do anamorphic, like, yeah, there's tons of options. Not to say that those don't exist on the other side. Yeah. But the thought I had about like the Sony and Canon rivalry, it feels like it's almost coming back to life, you know, and when this kind of stuff is announced, It doesn't feel like people are going to be switching back and forth as much anymore with the quality of product if they keep going in this direction. I guess the price point would be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because
you're switching back and forth between Canon and Sony?
Yeah.
Okay.
People jumping back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
Because, yeah, it doesn't feel like this is a big enough upgrade for someone to switch from FX6 to jump on the C400.
No.
And they would just be waiting for the FX6 Mark II.
Right.
Or whatever Sony has next.
I agree.
But new filmmakers that are getting into the space that are just shooting on mirrorless cameras now and trying to make the switch into what they want to invest in. I think of people like that are photographers shooting stills on Canon might look at the C400 and go, okay, I'm going to stay with it and not have to switch over as well.
Yep.
Because now I feel really comfortable having a good set of 2 stills cameras that are very reliable, great autofocus, great megapixel count, all that good stuff. And now having a dedicated cinema camera that can do virtually everything I need with 2 killer B&C cameras on set as well.
I think that's a good point to flag as well, that our backgrounds are hybrid.
Yeah.
It's photo and video. And I think that as you really just iterated, that is a huge reason why you're just choosing to stick with it, because you already have something that works on the still side. If you can just take those same lenses that you love and put them on the same mount for a cinema camera, great. Let's keep things as straightforward as possible. No need to overcomplicate that whole transition and everything. But it's interesting how I think the still side of things can influence that filmmaking decision. Is if you find the thing that you're comfortable with on a stills level and you are doing both equally, those two really do inform one another.
Totally.
I think a lot of people listening to this or looking at these cinema cameras are maybe strictly DPs, strictly filmmakers. That's all they care about. And so the decision is a lot maybe more straightforward, and they know exactly what they need. They know how much they want to spend.
Yeah.
They're manually focusing everything. They have a follow focus. They have a first AC. Like there's so many other things that
Or
are
the red world then.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
Komodo.
There's like so many other options and like so many less limiting factors, I would say. But because we're trying to thread that needle of, okay, how do we find the best value in between these two worlds that arguably are very different needs from the photo and video comparison? How do we find that thing that works on both levels? And for us, the stills cameras that we love are going to definitely influence the way that we want to choose a video camera as well, just to stay all in the same ecosystem of lenses, adapters, media, all that stuff.
But to that point as well,
Yeah.
it feels like this camera could be that thing where the person exclusively doing filmmaking might be like, oh,
Yeah.
because if it's that triple base ISO, 6K option, raw internal,
Yep.
they're looking at the FX6, they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's what makes me think the FX6 II will essentially have the same competition.
That's what I keep coming
spec-wise.
back to. I'm like, okay, I feel like whatever Sony does next is going to be almost like identical.
Yeah.
And then they'll, because they're Sony, have just a couple little like icing on the cake features that will be like, oh, of course I'm going to stick with Sony. But I think that will be the deciding factor when it's actually announced, when it's real. I think it's cool that Canon actually did this, and it wasn't like an R1 announcement, which everyone was pissed about, because it was like, guess what? We have an announcement. We're developing a new camera. We're like, that's not an announcement. Show us the camera. It's like, you're just telling us that you're developing an R1. I don't care. Show me the camera.
Right.
With this, they just went from, hey, we have an announcement, the C400, it's awesome. You can pre-order right now, kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, that's very exciting. That's cool. That's fuel on the fire for them. All that to say, I think the fall would just be a very interesting time for cameras, the evolution of both of these brands in particular. And I have no horse in this race anymore, because I think the C400 is awesome. I also never really needed a cinema camera personally for me to own. Would I want to own a C400? Absolutely, I would. Will I? No, because I don't need it by any means. I hope to use one, and I hope that one is yours when you buy it. But I'm very happy in the little Sony A7C kind of world right now, enjoying the compactness of everything.
Yep.
And it is that stills work that for me would inform any video stuff down the road, because I kind of see it from the inverse of like, oh, well, if I did something like that, I would want my stills cameras to use the same lenses, and I just don't want to go back to Canon stills cameras.
Right.
So I'll just figure out what works best for me going forward within the E mount for Sony. And it's probably going to be pretty comparable to whatever the C400 will be like in the end. But I'm very excited to see this. It's cool to see Canon with some kind of gusto again. Still love them. They're my dog for 10 years and I'll miss them. But it is very exciting to see a camera like this come out because of all the speculation for years and years about what this camera would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one last thought I had about it is that the size factor, I haven't even processed all of it yet. If I were to buy it, weight wise, probably very similar to the C70. So if I built it out, I could still use the EasyRig Mini Max that I own.
Yeah.
To fly it.
Probably.
And probably could fly it on one of the DJI gimbals.
Which one do you have?
The 3
Pro?
Pro.
Yeah, I think that's the one that we were showing in the product photos. If you strip it down to just the brain and a lens, you totally could.
Yep.
Yeah. They're showing it like that. So yeah.
It's awesome.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Be super fun.
So yeah, that's really cool. And that's a leg up that like Komodo owners don't have. Like they can't fly it that way. They have to build out a follow focus. So it's got to be on a bigger stabilizer.
Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah.
You know, so to have that, especially as we get into more running stuff and filming more running stuff, I look at that, I'm like,
yeah,
it's pretty.
Could be really cool.
Pretty great. Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's all I have to say about that.
This was a very fun way to kind of break into the current events space of an episode. This is, I think, truly our first time doing something that feels like we're on the cusp of something that was just announced and we might be on the forefront of talking about it online. So
except there were like 20 videos about it today.
Yeah. And all of them are using the same photoshopped image from B&H or from Canon's announcement. And it's just the same front angle of the camera. They're like, oh my gosh, look, I have it. It's right here in my hand. No, it's not. No, look, I have it. It's right here.
I am really like, I had a connection to Canon with the R5C.
Right.
So I might be sending an email soon.
Yeah.
Hey, so
you remember me?
So what are the chances?
I'll make 2 videos for you this time. Just send the camera over.
Could be a cool deal.
Yep.
For you. Yeah. This could be good for you.
Hey, this could be a good thing for you, man. Yeah, very excited to see what comes of this, and I think it'll be cool to see the competition that arises as well. Because anytime someone raises a product like this and pushes the envelope forward, people are going to respond.
Let's see.
Yeah, Fight's on.
Red's dead. It's owned by Nikon now.
Redcon. That's stupid. Yeah.
If you are watching, listening on YouTube, please comment below your thoughts about the C400 announcement. If you feel like there's going to be better options with Sony or any brand we're not talking about, you feel like is comparable, or if this is a waste of money, would love to know all your thoughts. We love reading those comments. And I don't know, this like because it's so close to home for me, it made me excited about gear again, especially seeing Canon do something that we haven't seen in a camera before. It's like, whoa, that's stirring the pot, and people are starting to chat a little bit about that. Yep. Could it be a gimmick? Yeah, maybe. But yeah, would love to know your thoughts.
Yep.
Like the video too, please.
Yeah, like the video, rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the places that you might be listening to this exclusively. Really appreciate you all being here and excited to continue on our road to our 100th episode by the end of 2024. Woo. I think this is episode 78 going out today.
We're almost halfway down by 2024.
We are. Yeah, we're hitting. Well, I think we'll have our 80th episode out by the end of June, if I'm doing the math right.
Yeah, sounds right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So 80 freaking episodes, man. Soon.
Yeah.
This
100's going to be a celebration.
100's going to be a celebration. We're going to do a whole, just to devolve into
party?
that real quick, like a party. I think like a live show or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Forgot.
A live show in the studio. Like do just like free tickets, just like sign up, have 40, 50 people come by, load up the studio, take live audience questions, make it like a 2-hour episode, just to have a lot of fun with it. And I don't know, do some like giveaways or something too. I don't know, just like have fun. Just make it a whole celebration because it deserves to be. Yeah. So anyway, we love you all. Thank you for being here, and we will see you in next week's episode of Rally Caps.
Good.
Good-bye.